Hi, this is Mrs. Rodriguez with Solving Two-Step Inequalities. So let's first take a look at the warm-up. The warm-up says a dance instructor earns $75 for teaching 3 classes. So let's go ahead and highlight $75 for teaching 3 classes. The instructor receives a 10% raise. Enter how much the instructor earns in dollars per class after the raise. Okay. So don't forget to highlight, always highlight and annotate or underline if you don't have a highlighter, the important information in the question so you know what it's asking and what the information's telling you. So $75 for 3 classes. The way I would approach this is first I'd want to know how much the instructor's getting paid for 1 class. So in order to do that, I'm going to do 75 divided by 3. And 75 divided by 3 is 25. So I now know that the instructor is getting paid $25 for each class. Now, the instructor is receiving a 10% raise. So in order to figure out what 10% is, I'm going to do 25 divided by 10, and I get 2.5. So if we want to know how much the instructor is going to get per class after the raise, it would be $25 plus 2.5, and we'd end up with $27.50. And that's our answer, $27.50. Okay, so today's lesson is on solving two-step equations. Now, this is basically review because we've already learned how to solve not two-step equations. Today we're doing solving two-step inequalities. So this is review because we've already learned how to solve two-step equations, and for the most part, you do it exactly the same, okay? So let's get started. Two-step inequalities follow the same rules for isolating the variable. That means getting x by itself. Think of it as undoing operations, okay? Undo addition or subtraction with the inverse. Now remember, inverse means opposite. Undo multiplication or division with the inverse. Once again, opposite operation. When you multiply or divide by a negative number, the inequality sign is flipped. Okay, keep that in mind. It's only when you multiply and divide by a negative, but the sign does flip. You isolate the variable and you check the inequality sign. All right, so let's go back to basics and write our basic steps here. Number 1, you're going to draw the river. Okay, that helps us keep our equation in balance, make sure that whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Number 2, you're going to do order of operations backwards. So that means instead of doing parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication slash division, and then addition slash subtraction, you're going to go backwards and you're going to do the addition slash subtraction first, then the multiplication slash division, then exponents, then parentheses. You're going backwards, okay? And our third step is to do the opposite operation. So if in the problem it's adding, you're going to do the opposite and subtract. If it's multiplying, you'll do the opposite and divide, okay? And then if it's an inequality, you're going to be graphing it, okay? And last but not least, don't forget, once again, this is important, guys. If you multiply or divide by a negative with inequalities, you flip the sign. All right, so let's do a couple of examples. We have 5x plus 9 is less than 17. So because we're doing order of operations backwards, we're going to do the 9 before the 5 because it's plus 9, and the 5 is 5 times x. And if we go backwards, addition comes before multiplication. So then the third step is to do the opposite. So the opposite of addition would be subtraction. So I'm going to subtract from both sides, and I get 5x is less than 8. Once again, we do the opposite operation. The opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And I get x is less than, notice the sign does not flip because we are not dividing by a negative. The sign stays the same. And we get x is less than 1.6. And that is our answer. Okay. Let's try the next example. Step 1, draw the river. Second step, order of operations backwards. So that -3 is going to come before that -2 times x, right? So third step, we do the opposite. So the opposite of subtracting 3 would be to add 3. The 3's cancel out and we get -2x is greater than 16. We do the opposite again, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by -2. My 2's cancel out, and my x, now we flip the sign because we just divided by a negative. So the sign needs to flip. And we get x is less than, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So we have -8. All right. So let's move on. Solve each two-step inequality below, then prove that your answer is correct. So let's look at number 1. First step, draw the river. Second step, order of operations backwards. Now remember, if a number's by itself with nothing in front of it, that means that there's a plus sign in front of it. It's a positive number. So the opposite would be to subtract, and addition and subtraction come before multiplication. So we're going to take care of that 10 before that 3 because that's 3 times k. So the 10 would come first, and we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. The 10's cancel out, and I get 3k is less than or equal to 12. I do the opposite again. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I get k is less than or equal to 4. Remember, the sign does not flip because that 3 is not negative. Now, to check our answer, we can just plug in, if k is less than or equal to 4, any number that's less than or equal to 4. So let's do an easy one and say k is 0. So that means 10 plus 3 times 0 is less than or equal to 22. All I did, guys, was plug it back into the original equation. 10 plus 0 is less than or equal to 22. Yeah, because 10 is less than or equal to 22. That's true, so we know we did it correctly. When I graph my solution, now I can graph my k is less than or equal to 4. I put 4 and then in a couple of numbers that are bigger, a couple of numbers that are smaller, and then I put my bubble on 4. We have the or equal sign in the problem, so that means my bubble's filled in. And then if k is less than or equal to 4, then we point the arrow in all the direction and all the numbers that are less than 4. So the arrow will go to the left. All right, now go ahead and do 2 and 3 on your own. Pause the video. And then when you're done and you're ready to check your answers, go ahead and restart the video and check and see if you got it correct. Pause the video now. All right, welcome back. So for 2, draw the river, add 5 to both sides, 5's cancel out. We get 24 is greater than -4, divide by 4, and we get -6 is greater than p. I put -6 and a couple of that are bigger, a couple that are smaller. The bubble goes on the -6. There is no or equal sign attached to that symbol, so it stays open, and the arrow is going to go to the right. For number 3, draw the river, subtract 3 from both sides. You get 1/2 r is less than 3. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide both sides by 1/2. These guys cancel out, and I get r is less than 3 divided by 1/2. To make 3 into a fraction, I stick a 1 under it, and then I have to remember when we divide fractions, we keep it, change it, flip it. So that's going to be r is less than 3 over 1. We're going to keep that, change the sign of multiplication, flip the other sign, and we end up with r is less than 6. Put 6 in the middle with a couple bigger, a couple numbers smaller, put the bubble on the 6. There is no or equal sign on the symbol, it's just less than, so we leave the bubble open and the arrow is going to point towards all the numbers smaller than 6 because r is less than 6. All right, moving on. The next page is just more practice, more practice, more practice. So go ahead and solve this page, pause the video, work out the problems, graph them, and then when you're ready to see if you got them correct, go ahead and resume the video and check your answers. Pause the video now. Okay, welcome back. So for the first problem, you should have gotten x is less than 10. Couple of numbers bigger, smaller, bubble stays open. X is greater than or equal to negative 2.6. So we're going to have negative 2, negative 1, negative 3. The bubble's going to go a little past the 2. It's going to be filled in and it's going to go towards the right. For the next one, x is less than 44. So I have 43, 44, and 45. There is no or equal to, so the bubble stays open and the arrow goes toward the left. Next one is x is greater than 14. So I have 13, 14, 15. The bubble's on the 14. It stays open because there's no or equal sign and the arrow goes to the right. The next one we get x is greater than or equal to negative 108. So we get negative 108, negative 107, and negative 109. The bubble goes on the 18, it gets filled in, and the arrow goes to the right. For 16, you get x is less than negative 3. We have negative 3, negative 2, negative 4. The bubble stays open, the arrow goes to the left. For the next one, we get x is less than negative 12. So we have negative 13, negative 12, and negative 11. Bubble stays open, arrow goes to the left. And we have x is less than 1.5. So we have 0, 1, and 2. It'll go halfway in between, no filling in, and the arrow goes to the left. Next one, we have x is less than or equal to 16. So we have 15, 16, and 17. The bubble goes on the 16, and it is filled in. The arrow goes to the right, and it's filled in because we have that or equal sign attached. Next one is x is greater than or equal to 2. So we have 2, 3, 4. Bubble on the 2, filled in, it goes to the right. And last but not least, we have x is greater than or equal to 11.6 with a bar on it. 11, 12, 13. I'm going to say it's about there, and the arrow is going to go to the right. So if you got them all correct, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. Good job. The next 2 pages are your homework. It's just practice, practice, practice. So you're going to solve on this page and then graph. And on the last page, you're going to solve by matching each of the inequalities with the appropriate graph. So if you'll notice, some of these cards have problems, and then some of the cards have number lines. So your job is to solve the problems with the number, solve the problems and then match which graph goes with it, which number line graph goes with it, and then write your pairs in the space below. And as always, remember, if you have any questions or if you need additional help, you can always ask me during class or make an appointment with me during office hours. Hope you have a great day.